It is with great sadness that I learned about the passing of Jeff Beck, a true virtuoso and one of the most influential musicians of our time. He had died suddenly of bacterial meningitis. I mean, this guy was basically unstoppable. He was 78 years old, and besides slinging a Strat on stage, he was into fixing cars and was just very active. That's why it comes as such a huge shock to everybody, because he seemed like one of those that would just go on, past 100. And he probably would have had he not have contracted this. So he was born in 1944, London, England, was in a few small-time bands, and then became a member of the Yardbirds. And they actually became one of the significant groups of the British invasion. But it was actually his work as a solo artist that cemented his place in music history. He was a very fluid guitarist. Probably the most vocal phrasing that I'd ever heard come out of a guitar has come from Jeff Beck. He made big use of the tremolo system, and unlike guitar players like Eddie Van Halen who'd use it for dive bombs and things like that, he actually used it for his actual phrasing of the notes. And that's what gave him such a fluid and vocal quality. And it turns out that he's actually one of the first known guitarists to really embrace the use of effects and electronics to help shape his sound. So you think about all the crazy guitar tones that have come out over the years, and a lot of that started right in the era of Beck when he was starting to experiment with that stuff. All throughout his career, he put out awesome albums. Truth, Blow by Blow. One of his songs I was actually introduced to through Paul Gilbert, who had covered it, was Beck-Ola. And interestingly enough, Paul Gilbert's version, which I loved, it was on a Guitar for the Practicing Musician magazine. After going back and listening to the original, it still sounded much more out of the box than even a cover of it did. And I was like, yeah, that's Jeff Beck for you. Jeff was also a big collaborator. A lot of people really liked his style of playing. He played with Stevie Wonder, Pavarotti, Cyndi Lauper, Macy Gray, Joss Stone, Buddy Guy, Winona Judd, Bon Jovi. But it didn't matter who he played with. He always fit the bill perfectly. His tenure with Rod Stewart brought many hits, including one of them that cuts right to the soul, People Get Ready, where his vocal-esque stylings on the guitar really come out strong. And of course, he played with Jimmy Page in the Yardbirds. Page has said when he's on, he's probably the best around. But it didn't stop there. Joe Perry from Aerosmith just flat out said, Jeff Beck is the best guitarist in the world. Another fun fact is that Jeff Beck was friends with Jimi Hendrix. They jammed together numerous times. Also, his song, Beck's Bolero, had Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, and Keith Moon on it, signaling the start of a band, which, as Keith Moon would put it, would go down like a Led Zeppelin. And then sure enough, on Led Zeppelin's first album, you could hear the influence of Beck's Bolero in How Many More Times. So many of my guitar playing buddies out there on YouTube and outside of YouTube are all reeling from this. I want to shout out blues rocker 6L6C, who is definitely the embodiment of Beck's tone and style. He brings his own thing to the table, but he always pays homage to his hero, and losing one of your heroes is never easy. So all the best to you, my friend, and to everybody else who's reeling from this sad and sudden loss. Now, the thing about Jeff Beck is that he always swung for the fences. He never opted for the conventional route. So while Eric Clapton was pumping out the hits, and those guys all kind of ran together, Beck pretty much relied on a real keen sense of innovation. He had actually cited Cirque du Soleil as a musical influence, talking about the sheer beauty and chaos at the same time that he wanted to bring into his own music. Put on any one of his albums, and really even especially the later albums, and it'll just transport you to another place. I highly recommend them, especially on long car rides. Those albums will just put you right into the zone. Had he have still been around, he'd be still kicking them out. I think Loud Hailer was one of his most underrated albums. It just burned from start to finish. Another thing about Jeff Beck is even through all his achievements, he managed to remain humble throughout his career. People loved to work with him. By all accounts, he was a great guy, and in every single note he played, his passion for music was evident. All of Jeff Beck's musical contributions will inspire generations to come. His wildness, his coolness, his innovation made a huge mark on the music community, and his loss will be felt deeply by so many of us. My heart goes out to his family, his friends, and his fans. Rest in peace, Jeff. Your music will live on forever. With this, I would like to pay tribute to him with a cover of Going Down, and I certainly hope to be able to do him proud. gone, gone. She's gone, 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 gone. Got my head out the window, my feet flat on the ground.
La 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 la.